Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the Soviet Tier 10 cruiser, the Smolensk, but before I get into that, I want to highlight the fact that I will be hosting my big giveaway this upcoming Friday on my stream. I recently held a giveaway for 70k Twitch followers, and now I got 70k YouTube subs as well. So, well, looks like we're having another giveaway this upcoming Friday on my stream. The good part is Twitch drops will also be enabled by then, so even if you don't win any giveaways, just watching the stream on Friday will still give you Twitch drops, which have a chance to give all sorts of juicy stuff like you can even get an Admiral Makarov from these Twitch drops. They have a chance to drop one of those. They give you signal flags, premium consumables, credits, blah blah blah, and so forth. So even if you don't win anything from the upcoming giveaway on Friday, you still have a high chance of just getting the Twitch containers and getting some loot from there. So no one should be coming out of the giveaway empty-handed. So the timing actually works out really well. This Friday, probably my normal stream time, so I'll probably see a lot of you guys then. Moving on to the ship itself. This is the Smolensk. This is the Soviet response to the Kolber that I featured 2 days ago. It's very squishy. That's probably something you probably already noticed. 32.4k health, less than all the competition. 20% less than the Zhao's 40k health. The lowest HP pool ship in the game. Even less than the Kolber that I featured. The Kolber had 36k, this has 32.4. And just like the Kolber, this thing has paper for armor. It's got a 60mm bow and stern, which means 229mm is enough to overmatch it, which means anything like a Henry IV or a higher caliber can easily overmatch your armor if you try to angle a nose in. The midsection, that is the upper belt and the deck armor in the center, is 30mm. So you can bounce 406mm guns, you can bounce 420s, but when you get to the 430s of, for example, the Republic or 460s of Yamato Musashi, they can overmatch your entire ship, basically. The Citadel is covered by just 70mm of armor, which is even thinner than Kolber's 80mm. Now, to put it into perspective, the Minotaur has 101mm of Citadel armor. So you take Minotaur's squishiness and then you remove 30% of the Citadel armor, so you get the Smolensk. So yes, obviously even DDs have an easy time citadeling this thing. The Citadel also rises well above the waterline, I'd say about a quarter of the way to the deck from the waterline, so it's not exactly a hard Citadel to hit either. Now, the concealment is very slightly worse than the Kolberg's. It has slightly better air detection, but slightly worse sea detection. Sitting at, with the full stealth build, you can reach 10km sea concealment and 4.6 air concealment. But thanks to the vastly different ballistics, as you can probably see here, shooting 15 kilometers away, if this was the Kolber, the shells would be arcing and raining down. Whereas with this thing, I can fairly accurately land these shells. And because of this, I've actually opted out of the concealment expert build. And of course, because of the smoke, I'll get into this later. But I've opted out of running concealment expert on this build. So I'm sitting at an 11.2 kmc concealment, 5.1 air. You also can't park the ship behind islands the same way you can the Kolbers because of the shells. I mean, it's much harder to arch these shells over islands because of how flat they are. But on the other hand, having this fast shell velocity means that you can spec into AFT to increase your gun range, as these guns benefit from it because they are such small caliber. But once again, I'll get into the guns a bit more later. The handling on the ship is quite good. It does 36.8 knots, that is with the flag. That's more than the Kolber without the without the boost. Oh god, all spood-based memes coming alive. So the Kolber without speed boost does like 34, and then with speed boost it does something like 41. So this thing obviously is faster than it when the speed boost isn't active. Handle's a lot worse though. It has a 750-meter turning circle, which for a cruiser isn't bad, but compared to Kolberg's 620, it's a pretty big difference. I'm comparing it a fair bit to the Kolber, by the way, since I feel like these are quite obviously competing against each other in similar play styles. And it has an 8.2 second rudder shift, which is also slightly worse. I also opted for going with the acceleration module on the ship instead of the rudder shift module, because, well, there's multiple situations where you need to quickly accelerate, like you're hiding behind islands, you're hiding in smokes, blah blah blah, you see torps, you get radar, whatever. There's plenty of, or you get plane spotted, whatever. There's plenty of situations where I've found that having faster acceleration benefits me more than the slightly faster rudder shift. It depends on from ship to ship. Now, the guns. We should move on to the guns. You see that the ship only has 4 turrets, but what makes the ship unique? Well, only 4 turrets. That's not exactly a small count, but what makes it unique is that all 4 of these turrets are quad turrets, which means they all have 4 guns. So you got 4 turrets with 4 guns for a total of 16 guns. The default range is 15.6, which is, what, 100 meters more than what the Colbert has, but the ballistics are vastly, vastly different. Because these are practically Grozovoi guns. So, even though they are only 130 millimeters, they still have that incredible Grozovoi shell velocity of 950 meters per second, which allows you to make great use of AFT to increase the range to a pretty incredible 18.7 kilometers. Now, I've tried slotting range mode instead of reload mode to get like 21 kilometers of range, but that's actually overkill. It's no longer worth the investment. First of all, you got enough concealment that you can get into positions where you don't need to sit so far away. And second of all, because these are still very light shells, 130 millimeters, the shell weight is just, it's too light, and the air drag slows down the shells so much when you start lobbing shells past 18 kilometers. They just become so slow that the shell travel time becomes obscene, and it's no longer worth the investment. The reload is 4.5 seconds, which is obviously much slower than Colbert's, but with the reload mode you can push it to 4 seconds. You could enhance this even further with BFT, another 10-second reload, but I actually prefer Demo Expert, as running Demo Expert and the flags allows you to reach 10% fire chance, which combined with the amount of shells you throw out makes it a disgustingly good fire starter. I haven't perhaps shown it so far in this commentary, but trust me, this thing is a very, very, very good fire starter. Because the guns are so small, HE pen also naturally suffers. Well, I say naturally, and then we look at ships like Haruguma, Kitakaze, and Akizuki that make no sense, but in general, the smaller caliber guns you have in World of Warships, the worse your HE penetration is. And Smolensk follows this rule. You have 21 millimeters of HE pen by default, which means you obviously pen pretty much nothing. But if you add IFHE, well, you see what happens when you shoot cruisers that don't have enough armor to actually shatter it. You can easily pen them all. In fact, you can gain, with IFHE, you can get up to 28 millimeters of HE pen, making the ship incredibly potent, especially against cruisers, because, well, it has so much DPM. The AP is also surprisingly deadly. You probably saw it a bit against the Mogami. You'll probably see it a little bit more all over the place. Even at some range, it has a lot of penetration, because, well, it's Grozovoi AP. Getting citadels might be pretty challenging, but AP pen is damn effective, because you have so many shells. You're throwing out 16 shells at once. Even if just 10 of them arm, it's still just 10. It's still a lot of damage per volley. So, oh, and of course, because the shell guns are so small, we're talking 130mm guns. The turret traverse is of course DD level, so you can see just how good this HE DPM is against ships that can't shatter your HE. Anyway, because they're small guns, you have DD levels of turret traverse, which means this ship can actually turn its guns 180 degrees in 6.9 seconds. The smoke is about to run out, and I don't want to get caught sitting still in my smoke. I want to start moving. There's probably torps coming. Yep, predicted that correctly. And we're gonna see if we can finish off this Minotaur. My battleship is actually having some big issues landing anything on this guy, which is a bit worrying, but my DPM, it's... When you don't shatter, if you face ships that don't shatter, the DPM is obviously incredibly insane. The problem is, though, the Minotaur decides to start spamming me, and, well, you can see what kind of damage he does. Minotaur has no issues whatsoever citadeling me, and with his improved pen angles he also citadels me very easily, even if I'm angled. So that was pretty much half my health gone. So I thought that was a pretty good example of just how quickly pretty much any ship that can hit your citadel can delete you. This ship has torps. Unlike the Colbert, the Smolensk also has torps, so it does give it some YOLO potential, as well as some defense against YOLO. But with 5 launchers on both sides, which are very, very classic Soviet torpedoes, aka 14.4K alpha, 60 knots of speed, 8 km range, basically the torps you see on almost all of these ships. It's unlikely to see too much long-range use, but the torps do have some value. Another great advantage of these torps is that they are actually fantastic for estimating the speed of enemy ships. Like the white line, the white predictive indicator, it tells you if a ship is slowing down, if it's accelerating, much faster than the smokestacks will inform you. So the torpedoes do have some additional use besides just torping things. The AA, well, unlike the Colbert, the Smolensk doesn't have that high of a continuous DPS on the mid-range, nor does the mid-range cover as much range. Now the amount of flak it throws out with 90% accuracy makes it quite deadly, so not an ideal target for a carrier. T8 carriers will suffer. They can't really touch the ship without large plane losses. However, that really only applies with your defensive AA active. In fact, you're gonna see in this game, I chose this game in particular because it will show you how easily I shred the planes with defensive AA active. Surprisingly, defensive AA being useful. I know this is very shocking. And then it will show you how much the AA suffers once defensive AA is on cooldown, even against a tier 8 carrier. In fact, he will be able to punish me quite significantly. I was a bit surprised by how hard it happened towards the end of the game. Now, another major difference, which you're seeing activated right now, is obviously something I haven't touched upon yet, and that's the smoke. While the ship doesn't have a speed boost like the Colbert, it instead has a smoke, which for a squishy HE spammer is obviously more valuable. With a 5.9 km smoke firing penalty and an amazing 18.7 km AFT range, you can smoke up just about anywhere outside of radar range and just farm away, making the ship much safer in open maps than the Colbert. And also, of course, why I call this thing a bit of a super Kutuzov. Keep in mind though that the 32.4k health pool means you really don't want to tank any torps being sent into your smoke, because obviously you're a juicy target for any DD. You can slot Hydro if you replace defensive AA, but in the current meta I really haven't bothered, and honestly I have yet to be torped in my smoke. No super heals on this one, like on, for example, the Minotaur, so any damage you take, you're gonna suffer from it. Even blind fire in smoke is brutal, as cruisers can so easily citadel you, as you saw earlier from the Minotaur, and they can do it at pretty much any range because your citadel armor is so thin. The smoke is very useful, but people blind spamming your smoke is not a fun experience. I'm gonna have to leave this smoke because I don't know what the DD is doing. I expect him to be torping, he might be pushing. Something is contesting, yep, there we have, as expected. Now, you don't really want to do what this cat Tashkent did, and that's any sort of close range fights against the Colbert in the DD. The sheer amount of Grozovoi HE shells you throw out means that your damage is disgusting, and the shell velocity allows you to pretty damn easily actually nail your targets. Something else I need to mention upon is the fact that I've actually opted into last stand on this ship. There's multiple reasons for this. First of all, the very thin armor and the very large vulnerable citadel means that, well, sometimes even HE breaks your engine. Moskva HE, for example, has broken my engine multiple times. Not because it citadels you, but apparently the splash damage is too much for this squishy ship and the engine just breaks repeatedly. The rudder is also extremely vulnerable. When you're cutting away and they shoot you, they will often just break your rudder. And Enterprise is coming in, so I activate defensive AA. Maybe a bit too early, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was focusing more on killing the DD, and I just looked at the minimap. So I think this is actually going to be a wasted defensive AA, and this is something that's going to come back to bite me later, because he doesn't go for me, he turns and goes for the Sovietsky Soyuz. So that's a misplay, and I shouldn't have wasted it, because, well, defensive AA is quite important on keeping you alive. But last stand, I tried going jack of all trades for faster smoke cooldowns, but ultimately I felt like you just have to go for last stand. Because every time someone would HE spam me, and even if I didn't take much damage, it would pretty much break my rudder or my engine, and then I'd have to stop shooting because, well, damage con is on cooldown because I had to repair the broken engine and I couldn't afford to fire, because if they broke it again, then obviously I'd be very much dead. Sean Bart will show us will you see how many shatters I'm getting, and then I decide, well, hold on, he's giving so much broadside. I need to wake up here and I need to switch to AP, and even battleships at this range will eat huge chunks from this AP. I've hit, well, cruisers, battleships, anything. I've hit up to 9k AP volleys because you have so many of them. You just throw out so many of them that you can easily finish off pretty much any target. At this point though, this game is obviously, well, you can see this game is a bit of a disaster from my team. I have killed 6 people, which is literally half the enemy team, and we're still losing extremely heavily here. AFT coming in really useful here. I thought that the Kaga just forced the damage con on this Aiva. Or it looks like he damage con the fire right away, so obviously I'm gonna just rain down HE on him and trying to get a second fire. Carrier comes in for a drop. This time you get to see defensive AA in action. When I zoom out here, you can see just how much flak is shredding that squad, and the squad instantly dies. So that's defensive AA active. But sadly, because I kind of misplayed earlier, also right now after the squad is dead, I should turn off AA and turn it back on again. For those that aren't aware, turning off and on AA forces your defensive AA consumable on cooldown. I do it now, but that's a good 10-15 seconds wasted. I should have done that earlier. Obviously I'm a bit more focused on dodging the shells and trying to get this Aiva killed, but that's something you should keep in mind. As soon as the squad is dead, as soon as the plane squad is dead, just quickly tap AA on and off. I think the default key is P, which is awful. I've rebounded to Z because it's much more easily accessible while you're controlling your ship. But if you know you're the prime target for the carrier and you know he's going to come back in with a strike, as he is right now, instantly popping defensive, forcing defensive AA on and off is highly valuable and what you need to keep alive. I'm hoping the Kaga can finish the Aiva, because as you can see, the Aiva is actually doing massive damage, also forcing me to angle against him. It puts me in a really awkward position where I have to deal with 3 targets at once. And now you see what the AA does, even with the focused fired sector with no defensive AA. I shredded planes earlier, now he gets the drop off, no problem. Forces me to line in straight towards the Bismarck to dodge the torpedoes. Iowa is still shooting me because my Kaga, or my carrier, failed to kill his last 4k health. And the planes I shot down were actually the fighter planes, and he gets to come in for a second drop. Defensive AA is finally available again, but at this point it's too little, too late, and I'm honestly a bit surprised by how bad the AA all of a sudden is when the consumable is not active. At this point we have almost no health left. I think my last move here should be just to throw out Desperation Torps on the Bismarck, but I'm trying to get as many fires as possible before I die, hoping he will burn down at least. I turn out to try to dodge the Torps, but I mean, there were no good options there. The Bismarck was going to kill me anyway. This game obviously ends up in a defeat. The fires I have on the Bismarck burn him for a fair bit, but it's not enough to win the game. They've been contesting our cap, so their points lead is too massive. The reason I was pressing aggressive there was, of course, we had so little time, and even killing the Bismarck and Iowa wouldn't have been enough to give us the game. We would have needed to kill the carrier afterwards. Unluckily though, none of that happened. Still though, 2997, which rounded up is a nice 300k damage game, which is obviously quite impressive. And the fire chance I mentioned earlier in the match, well, you can quite clearly see it here, 23 fires, which is obviously a disgusting amount for any game. 32 planes, defensive AA active, quite the plane shredder, defensive AA on cooldown. Not even a tier 8 carrier is dropping me without too many issues. And I didn't really eat, in my opinion, any HE spam, so I think my AA was actually at 100% when that happened. So unlike the Colbert, which is always good against planes, Smolensk is much more situational. Team score wise, well, the score speaks for itself. 2.2k base, 32 planes, 6 kills, still not enough. It was played on a weekend, of course, and winning games on the weekend, well, killing half the team is clearly not enough for a weekend victory. Detail report wise, it becomes a bit amusing, of course, the amount of shells fired. Once again, we got 2.3k shells fired, 808 HE hits, and a good chunk of AP hits. Sometimes you shoot more AP, sometimes you shoot more HE. Honestly, a ridiculous amount of potential damage. You don't usually get this much in a Smolensk. This was a bit of a weird game. 2.6 million potential in a squishy cruiser with 32k health. That says a lot more about my team than anything. Fire damage, almost 100,000. hardly surprising, this thing is a disgustingly good fire starter, which I did mention and which you probably got to see as well. I think I'll post, I have another game in the Smolensk. This was a like 300k damage game. I have another game which I win where I do like 288k damage, and honestly it's such an effortless 288k damage that obviously the ship is quite overtuned. I think the Kolber is more fun to play. I think the Kolber is a more enjoyable ship. But when it comes to versatility, effectiveness, and so forth, I think the Smolensk is just an absolute monster, and it does feel quite overtuned. Not sure how they would tune it. Maybe the fire chance doesn't need to be quite this disgusting. Make it weaker against battleships, or I'm not sure. But in its current state, the Smolensk, it's a bit too much. The average potato will probably explode quite quickly, but once again, in the hands of a player who knows what he's doing, this is a very, 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 very nasty ship. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this little preview, early look. I won't say it's first impressions because I played the ship a fair bit, but I mean, 10 games or something isn't exactly enough to make a complete professional opinion on anything. I hope to see you guys on Friday for my big giveaway. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed it and have a fantastic rest of the day.